Welcome to Cloud Insiders, the podcast that brings cloud down to earth.
I'm sat here with Sam McGeown, a lead consultant at Xtravirt, and also Chris Lewis, who's a senior consultant at Xtravirt. Thanks for joining us, guys.
All right, no problem.
Today we're going to talk about vRealize, vRa, and maybe a bit of vRo. So who wants to kick us off with the high level? What is vRealize Suite?
vRealize Suite is VMware's cloud management platform, whether that be private cloud, hybrid cloud, and it's used by customers to manage, deploy, automate, monitor, report on their private cloud or hybrid cloud infrastructures.
Right. And how long has it been around for?
So a bit of the history of vRa. There was a product called Dynamic Ops, which was a .NET platform that was used for automation. That was acquired by VMware, and it was chewed around and built around and became spat out as a product called vCloud Automation Center, VCAC, or VCAC. You're not supposed to call it VCAC. And then vRealize is sort of a couple of generations along from that product. So we're on vRealize 7 now. It started at VCAC 5, so we've got a couple of generations of maturity, and there's a whole load of sort of integration and features that are baked into the version now that maybe weren't before. You still see the Dynamic Ops product in the code and things like that of vRa, but it's a long way from where it was.
Right, okay. So how does vRa or vRealize automation layer into that?
vRealize Suite, from a VMware point of view, is a combination of products.
Yes.
It's vRealize Automation, vRealize Operations, vRealize Orchestrator, and vRealize Business. Some of those products have sub-component products as well, but vRealize Automation is the cloud portal for users to be able to request services, self-provision, and deliver their services to their end users or themselves.
Right. Okay. So now I understand. And so if we were to focus on the automation piece for a moment,
Yep.
What's driving the move in that direction?
It's empowering users to deliver services for themselves without having to engage in the traditional life cycle of an IT project.
Right. Which would be, if you take an example.
So a project that might traditionally take 6 to 7 to 8 weeks will now, to deliver a virtual machine or a couple of virtual machines, will now take half an hour, 40 minutes, and they can do that themselves. And it, especially in this like the development sort of cycle where they want to deliver a virtual machine, run a piece of code, and then remove the virtual machine, they can do that themselves. It can last days, hours, weeks, and be automatically taken away, or they can do that themselves. And they can expand it, they can make it bigger, they can make it smaller, they can customize the t-shirt size blueprints that can be delivered.
One thing we see a lot of customers is it allows you to take control of things like if you've got a lot of shadow IT going on where you've got departments going out to AWS, private cloud, public cloud stuff, where you've got no control over what's going on in that public cloud. You can actually bring that control back, and vRa can act as a broker of clouds for you, if you like, and you can have workloads being deployed into AWS, but it can be centrally managed, and you can have authorizations, you can have approvals around that. And with vRealize Business, you can have costings. So when a user goes to request a virtual machine, for example, they can see, this one in AWS is going to cost this much an hour. Perhaps this one in vCloud Air is going to cost you this much an hour. Or in the private cloud, we're going to set a cost of this much an hour. And it gives non-technical users a bit more of a choice about where they deploy things. And from the IT point of view, it gives you control. It means that you've got one portal that you can deploy to all these different private clouds, public clouds, without necessarily having that whole shadow IT going on where you've got credit card bills for one section of AWS and 50 different AWS accounts and a couple of vCloud Air and some Azure. Azure is not actually supported yet, but at 7.1 it will be supported. So there's a whole kind of governance thing which is really, really useful. It allows you to make sure you retain that control over sort of spending and that sort of thing.
It's about the business being able. So vRealize Business component of the vRealize Suite is all about being able to show back or charge back internally into an organization to say, so individual teams or parts of the organization have control of an IT budget and they understand how much these services are costing them. And that's the key part of vRealize business. But also, as Sam said, being able to make that decision in a vRealize automation point of view, to be able to say it's going to cost X amount a month to pull it into AWS or vCloud Air, or it's going to cost me Y to put it into my private cloud, and I can make that decision based on the sort of the OpEx of that, and so I'm informed and empowered to make that decision as a customer.
Right. So, and I definitely get that, and we've talked previously about cloud sprawl and wanting to avoid it, and I can see that playing in with the idea of limiting the amount of shadow ops that's going on.
Yeah, it also allows the lifecycle management means that you don't have VMs hanging around that a developer spun up for a day and then forgot to shut down. So you get the whole lifecycle managed of each VM.
So as an example to that, you can set a machine lease time that says, this machine is available for 5 days, and after 5 days, send an email to the person who requested it to see if they want it still. And if they don't reply or they don't want it, we'll automatically tear it down, and that those resources will automatically be recovered so they can be used for something else.
And I can see that being attractive to management because they're looking at that and thinking, now I understand, now I know the cost, and now I can start to automate the process to control it and increase efficiency. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. What types of organizations in terms of size and in terms of vertical are we seeing moving towards vRealize?
I think it comes down to the type of organisation. There's normally two types. You either have a service provider who is providing multiple tenants, their customers, or internally deploying a massive system, like some of the big players in the market. Or you have a slightly smaller organisation who just want to be able to provide their developers or their users with that control and empower those users to be able to deliver the services. And from a vRealize automation point of view, what you have to remember, the customer sees a nice shiny portal, but the background to that is a lot of hard work the IT organisation has to do to make sure that it's nice and smooth and easy and it's simple to use.
Right. And that might segue us quite nicely into some of the pitfalls, some of the things that you've seen organizations and clients struggle with when they go to roll out, particularly the automation piece. What are some of those things?
There's kind of a sort of standard that you would respond to for any kind of automation, and vRa as an automation platform has those same pitfalls. For example, it's easy to have a defined process and automate that process. But if you don't have a defined process, if there's no standard build, you first have to define all of that before you can then do that standard build. So where vRa and any kind of automation is useful is when you've got repeatable tasks, you've got things that you do perhaps often that are maybe time consuming manually, but you can automate it, and you spend a little bit more time automating that process, but you end up with something that can be repeated and it can be done consistently and it can be done in a fraction of the time that you sort of use it. So for example, recent customer, each time they wanted to deploy a new VM, they sent off a standard request form, and they were given a 2-week lead time to deploy a new VM. Now, with the platform that we built and with the automation, we were building their standard VMs in 4 minutes. So that's a huge level of difference. Now, that's only useful if that particular VM is going to be deployed lots of times. There's no point in us spending 2 weeks getting all that automation set up if that VM is only ever going to be deployed once a year. But if you're going to deploy 10 of those, well, you've got your sort of net gain.
Right.
And I think it's also important that, to me, vRealize automation is part of a managed change process. It's not replacing it, it's augmenting it. So you would still have your traditional change management process if you were running a project. So there's two use cases, I guess. There's your end users wanting to deploy machines rapidly and being able to recover those resources once they've been finished used, but also as an organisation who is maybe an IT managed organisation for an end customer, augmenting the change process with vRealize Automation and vRealize Orchestrator means that those mundane steps that are prone to user error are taken out of the equation, and it makes it much simpler. So, for example, if you wanted to, every time you deployed a virtual machine to a production environment, you wanted to update the CMDB, you could do that automatically as part of that deployment. You wouldn't have to remember to do it or forget to do it. It's probably the more accurate way. So your whole of your IT organization becomes a lot more cohesive because you're automatically updating your CMDB. Therefore, it's always up to date. And that's one of the biggest things with organizations, is making sure that all the information is up to date and accurate, so that they can make those informed decisions about additional purchases or things like that.
Right. And you say 2 weeks, Sam. Chris, you're talking about bringing some order to process. Both of those things sound like enterprise problems and possibilities to me. Is that what you're seeing, or are you seeing it across the board?
I don't think it's just enterprise. I think anybody that wants to invest the time up front will get a saving in the long term. So whether that be an enterprise thing or a small business, small to medium business, I think they'll get the gains from doing that. I think what's important is the multiple products in vRealize suite aren't for everybody. There's lots of things that won't be used. vRealize Automation is one of those products, and vRealize Orchestrator is one of those products that will be used, and if it's implemented well, will save time and will save money, and will mean that your IT organization can concentrate on other things, improve profit, improve everything else that your business needs to do, because they haven't got to worry about the mundane task.
Have you both seen some fairly successful project rollouts where that was realized, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, so I think the projects that are most successful, they don't just look at deployment sort of capabilities of vRa, but with vRealize Orchestrator, you have anything as a service, XaaS stuff, where you can integrate Orchestrator with any system that has a standard API. So anything with a REST API, anything with SOAP APIs. There are also a ton of plugins for different things. So for example, you can deploy users to Active Directory using web forms, and your HR department can create users into Active Directory, but they're doing it from the same portal that they're requesting a new virtual machine from, or anything like that.
So we're not just talking about VMs here.
No, we're not.
It's a full self-service catalog.
Yeah, so some of the things that perhaps you might do, example project, we're working with load balancers, a particular brand of load balancer, F5 load balancers. We're using the REST API to deploy load balancer context. And so the VMs that are deployed are part of a larger application blueprint. And within that blueprint, we're deploying a new load balancer with a virtual IP configuration of that load balancer, and the whole application stack is deployed. Similarly, you have other customers who maybe someone in ServiceNow creates a new user record, and that user record is used to trigger a request to Active Directory through vRa and Orchestrator, and you get this joined up IT where the Active Directory user is synchronized with the ServiceNow object in the CMDB. The possibility is endless. I always think of it as that unlimited power. You can orchestrate anything that has an API. So anything that you can. One of the problems with it is you can do so much. There are so many possibilities. It's difficult to sort of think, well, actually, I've got to nail something specific down here and work out what I'm going to do, because there are so many possibilities of interaction. So,
and have you almost seen that work as a negative in projects where organizations are thinking, gee, where do I start?
One of the pitfalls of organisations trying to deliver vRealize Suite is they underestimate what it can do. And once they know what it can do, how long it takes to get there.
Right.
So it's not necessarily complex to deliver a vRealize automation infrastructure. The ability to do things, it's the capability to do them afterwards. So creating those orchestrator workflows, creating AAS blueprints is a complicated workflow process, but you can reap the benefit once it's there. And as Sam said, if it's the wrong thing to do to automate everything, especially if you're only going to deliver it once. But if you're continually delivering multi-machine blueprints, firewalls, load balancers, anything that's scriptable or has an API that can be referenced, then vRealize Orchestrator and vRealize Automation is the right tool.
I think one of the really interesting aspects of it is everyone sort of bands around the SDDC, the idea of the software-defined data center. But with vRealize and integration with things like NSX, you can actually start deploying not only just the whole application stack, but the networks that are in the background. You can deploy rooted networks, you can deploy private networks, you can deploy load balancers with NSX. And that's all out of the box, tight integration with vRa. So as a platform, it's a huge enabler. But what you've got, what tends to happen is you have a business, maybe they've got a specific need. Okay, we need to deploy this application. We need to do it quicker than we are. Can you come in and do that? And you start talking to people and you say, well, did you know you can start deploying maybe this network and do this automatically? You can create copies for, say, your QA environment of this application and isolate that network and just allow a certain group of people to access it. And you see the light bulb moment where people's kind of imagination starts to pick up, and they'll ask you, can you do this? Oh, can you do this then? Oh, we've got this API. Can you integrate with that? And I think that's one of my favorite bits of doing the sort of vRa engagements is when people start to realize, actually, this is a powerful tool.
No pun intended.
Yeah, they start to realize. And so that light bulb moment where people actually kind of get it and they can see the interactions between systems and so if we do that, we don't need someone to go and fill in a paper form XYZ. We can get it approved through the system and then it'll go in. And yeah, it's great. People often have this one use case which we're brought in to automate, but it suddenly becomes project scope creep. But it's great because it means people are getting the whole platform.
I think the tagline really should be the possibilities are infinite. So you can do anything and everything with it.
Only problem with that is that it may have been done. Yeah. Okay, so when should you not automate?
I think we probably covered that.
We covered that. I mean, if it's a one-off implementation, then taking the time to orchestrate and automate that would potentially be seen as a waste of effort. But otherwise, if you're doing it, regularly, more than once, then that's the right time to automate.
Okay. So I'm a CTO of a mid-sized org. I'm starting to think about the potential. What are the things that I need to cover off before I A, start the team looking at it, or B, look to bring a consultancy in such as Xtravirt?
So I think it's useful to have a really clearly defined set of requirements. That's one of the key things that when we go into to automate or to do a project like that, the requirements are really what drives it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do that by yourself. I mean, we can help define requirements. We can, through discussions, we can tease those requirements out. And that's something that we're used to doing as part of projects. So really, you need to have a use case. You need to know what you want to automate. So, if you've got this application that you deploy, X times a month and you want to automate that, or perhaps maybe you want to take control of cloud sprawl, or you want to give a single point for everyone to come to where they get their self-service, they get their user accounts, they get their VMs, they get their load balancers. They can also deploy to hybrid cloud stuff. Then that control, I think, is very good. I guess Lifecycle.
Yeah, I mean, I think in small to medium-sized organisations where they don't have things like, or potentially don't have things like ServiceNow and different type of service desk products, then but they do have a vested interest in VMware products, then vRealize automation gives them that self-service portal that you may get with a large organisation with ServiceNow. And that sort of workflow approval process, I want to deploy a virtual machine, but my boss has to approve it first. And you can drill down to the fact, well, actually, my boss only has to approve if I'm deploying more than one virtual machine and I'm changing the size of it. So there's some real sort of approvals, sort of changes that you can do. And I think that's, one of the sort of the biggest use cases for me, as well as, I guess initially I saw vRealize automation as development test, crash and burn, rapid sort of delivery, rapid sort of removal. But it is getting into that position where we've got this cloud sprawl, where we can actually pushed to public clouds, and it may be that you for a particular financial period or a particular time in a customer's sort of calendar where they want to, they might be selling something on the web, and they want to expand their presence to cope with the expected demand, and they might not have the on-premise infrastructure to do that. They don't want to invest in it, and so they want to deliver the same sort of web front-ended services but into a public cloud service, and then pull that back down again. But they may do that, 3 times a year, but they want to be able to automate that so that they don't have to worry about doing it. They can just do it.
Yeah, and I guess that means that there's a sense of control over the kind of bill shock that an unplanned cloud migration might lead to.
And a reduction in the cost of shadow IT.
Okay. What about the future? If you look at the next couple of years and the platform and the technology, where do you see it going?
So for me, I reckon that it will be used much more in the sort of broker of clouds kind of role. I see on-premises. What's the right word?
On-premise.
On-premise. Yeah. That's wrong. On-premises. It's on the premises. So the in-house IT, the private cloud stuff, I think will largely shrink down to those applications that businesses have to have on board for certain regulatory reasons and that sort of thing. And a lot more stuff is going to be pushed out to public cloud. And I see vRealize as a really strong way of controlling that. It allows you to retain control over the approval processes, over the life cycle, and over what's placed where, and you get a huge policy engine around that. And I think, to me, that side of it is only going to grow. The integrations with other systems, it's all great, and it's all sort of back-end functionality, but really the control over cloud and the ability to broker between clouds is definitely the future.
And I tend to agree. I think that the on-premise private cloud infrastructure, just like when we move from wholesale physical infrastructure into the virtual world, there'll be certain things that won't be able to be virtualized because of the product or the hardware requirements. In traditionally, from a virtual point of view, moving to cloud, that's the next stage. There'll be certain things that can be virtual but can't or don't really fit within that cloud model, and so vRealize will be used to sort of bridge the gap and provide that sort of top layer to do that. And I think also OpenStack will come into that as well. So sort of containers, Docker, that sort of stuff. And I think that will, over the next 12 to 18 months, will shift towards that as well.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I was sitting here thinking to myself, what if I, as a CTO, am buying into the OpenStack philosophy? What if I don't want vendor lock-in? How does vRealize Suite then play into my world?
So currently you can deploy to OpenStack. You can deploy to OpenStack-based cloud. You can, and that's just a standard sort of integration that you have out of the box these days. I think in terms of in future that there's definitely a case for sort of the continuous integration side of things and the rapid pulling up and tearing down of microservices. What I'm wary about is obviously that it's fledgling. So loads of people doing the whole, Kubernetes, Mesos, Puppet Swarm and all that. You've got lots of different competing products at the moment that are all sort of developing. And I think the important thing is that vRa has the ability to interact with APIs. And APIs are the future. People should be building APIs first and then the GUI interaction late. And to me, the APIs and the functionality there is the key. So if you want to deploy through Docker, you can use the REST API and deploy Docker, or same with all the other sort of the container platforms or OpenStack. Anything that's got an API we can control and we can develop integration for. So to me, that's more of a case of any product should have an API that we can then leverage rather than necessarily one or the other.
Yeah, right.
Definitely.
So I guess in some ways we could say that vRealize Suite brings to the ops world the kind of API and flexible plug and play cross-platform interoperability that web dev have had for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could say that. I wouldn't say it's aimed at the CI sort of continuous integration kind of piece as yet, but you can manage tools that would enable CI, and I think that integration will become tighter as time goes on. Yeah,
The future is bright.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Really helpful. That brings us to the end of another episode of Cloud Insiders. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. And to find out more and access show notes and downloads, head over to cloudinsiders.fm. You can track us on Twitter at Cloud Insiders, and we'd love you to leave us a review on iTunes. See you next time. This episode was brought to you by Xtravirt, trusted independent consultants for data center, workspace, and cloud transformation. For help solving complex IT challenges and unlocking the full potential of your technology, head over to xtravirt.com.